Mid-ticket podcast, zoom it up, that's right. And it's on the mic, pictures day and night. Bouncing on his beat as we shine so bright. Cricket all around, believe the hype.
Hello and how good is cricket? Welcome back to the Mid-Wicket Podcast. My name is Sunny and we are on the precipice of an incredible, massive 5-test series in the Border Gavaskar Trophy between the Australian and Indian cricket teams. Now, joining us for this episode today is a couple of guests we've had before on the earlier shows. Firstly, welcome back to the show, Kishan.
Hey guys, good to be here.
Great. And our second guest today, of course, is Heelzy. Heelzy, very keen to have another dross with you today.
Thanks for having me. Me too.
Awesome. Guys, we are here to preview the series, of course. It's the biggest series on the calendar. The two teams know each other really, really well. The last opponent that both of these teams have had is New Zealand. India have famously lost their test series recently. And prior to that, Australia last played a test match in March. So it's been a good, 8 months since they've had any kind of test cricket. They've obviously played a lot of white ball cricket before. Both of these teams are completely fired up for this test match. I know India's been having a very competitive internal trials in the WACA, and Australia have been warming up through the white ball series, but all they've been talking about is this test match series coming up. We've got two aging batting lineups. We've got two very talented bowling lineups with lots of pace and spin. We've got two really excited fan bases that expect so much from their respective teams. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I can't wait for the test match series to begin. Heelzy, maybe I'll start with you first. How do you feel about this series coming up?
Well, Sonny, you mentioned some pretty big points there about, the aging batting lineups. And now the first sort of feeling I have is a little bit of trepidation and a little bit of uneasiness that this actually might be the last time we get to see some of the greats on our shores. So I don't think we'll see Rohit and Virat again here in Australia, especially in the red ball format. There might be more. And even with the Australian batting lineup, you think about you'd assume that there's a few more years of cricket for Steve Smith and maybe for Usman, but then you also think of with Ricky Ponting, he was such an amazing player and he probably stayed for one too many series, and I think that lasting memory of him falling over against South Africa here in Australia, you don't want that to be your sort of memory of a great cricketer. So if Steve Smith and Usman and maybe a couple others play really well, what a way to go out, if they can win the series. And again, similarly to with VK and Rohit, if, they're a bit older as well, 35 plus, and if, this might be the last time we see them, and that feels a little bit uneasy for me because, when you go to watch cricket, you want to watch the big players score runs, and we've grown up watching these guys do it on the big stage for so long. Both teams have gone in with sort of older lineups that haven't blooded too many young players. Australia have only got that one player that's under 30 and McSweeney. India have got a few maybe younger bowlers, but they're not super, super young either. So, yeah, just that a little bit of uneasiness, which most people have in the lead up to a big test series.
And Kishan, how about yourself, mate? How do you reckon this will go?
Well, it's funny. You guys have touched on how there are a couple of flaws that look like both teams share. And I think last time I spoke to you, Sonny, it was really gearing up as, India and Australia, these two untouchable, cricketing powers. And since then, India's lost to New Zealand 3-0, as you mentioned. And Australia, while different format, lost to Pakistan. And obviously it's a different format, white ball. But, the Australian team was exposed in Perth. Harris Ralph, with his pace, kind of showed that this Australian batting lineup isn't, exactly bulletproof. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Obviously, India, we know, as Heelzy mentioned, Rohit Sharma's coming, he's aging. Virat Kohli's coming towards the end of his career. So it's really intriguing that, while this series is stacked with big names who have performed incredibly over the last 10, 15 years, the guys that we're used to seeing perform may not be able to perform to the same level that they have in the past, and that just makes things all the more intriguing. And it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens.
Absolutely. Now, even in the lead up to this series, there has been some really big storylines. From an Indian cricketing perspective, we've obviously seen the very surprise loss against New Zealand. There is an unlikely chance now that India will make the Test Championship final. They're coming into this series without their captain, who hasn't arrived yet on Test shores and will probably miss at least the first Test match. There's injuries to key players. Shami, he's not here yet. There's talks he might be here. Kuldeep's out of the tour altogether. Kale's copped a knock to his forearm in this internal trial at the WACA. There was reports that Virat Kohli has gone and had some scans done. Mystery. We don't know what that is. And Rishabh Pant's coming back from a long layoff. Obviously, he's played Test cricket since his miraculous escape from that car accident. Meanwhile, the big story coming out of Australia in this whole build up to this series is the opener's spot. And amongst all of this, the thing we've forgotten is they've lost a key all-rounder and a young key all-rounder in Cameron Green. But that's the only real storyline that's come out of the Australian cricket team, I feel, which probably speaks to the stability of that team. Australia will definitely be coming into this series as favourites, especially in the background of what's just happened in the Indian Test Test series against New Zealand. Boys, I want to throw back to you, Kishan, first. What do you think are the big issues that'll come out of this series in the next couple of months?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Nathan McSweeney, the opener spot, I think it'll be a lot of pressure on the young man, but we can't expect him to light the world on fire. He's opened one match in his first class career, and that was against India A in Melbourne. So he's 25. He's done the hard yards. I think he's averaged close to 50 over the last 2 seasons in Sheffield Shield. So I think Australian fans and the media have to be patient and almost go, okay, he's got 5 tests. Let's just let him go. But the big thing, I think, the watch is on Steve Smith. Does he still have it? Famously very, very, very good against India. I think averages, upwards of 65 against India. But, you can tell he's maybe not quite the player that he once was, and that's not a knock on him. The guy was averaging 60, so and was getting compared to the best since Bradman. But it'll be really important to see if Steve Smith is still Steve Smith of old, and if he isn't, what does that mean for this Australian batting lineup? Because Usman Khawaja's 37 and averaged 30 last year. I mean, we talked about Steve Smith being probably not the Steve Smith as an open experiment didn't work. He averaged 28. I think Usman Khawaja averaged 30, so he wasn't that much better last year. Marnus has been averaging, averaged 30 last year as well. So, and then, Travis Head, he's been in great form in white ball cricket. Can he bring that over? I mean, and he's also been great in red ball cricket, to be fair, but, hasn't played for a while. Mitch Marsh, both him and Travis Head have been absent from the team due to having kids. So they've been away for a while. And the one form batsman in the Australian lineup is probably Alex Carey at 7. So, obviously India's batting woes have been highlighted, and quite fairly, but Australia as well aren't as secure as maybe they might seem on the surface. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with their batting lineup and how Bumrah, Arshdeep, and Siraj, if they can make any inroads, and of course Ashwin and Jadeja as well.
Yeah, so batting seems to be the key concern for yourself there, Kishan. How about yourself, Heelzy? What do you think are some of the big issues that are going to arise in this series?
Well, you mentioned, there's 5 or 6 storylines for the Indian cricket team and only 1 for the Australian one. I actually think the Indian cricket team are going to thrive in this chaos. I think, like they've done it before, and you almost need to show that resilience when this is the time to do it, on the big stage, the big series. So I'm not as negative about the Indian cricket team as others probably are. That doesn't mean I'm super positive about the Australian cricket team either. I think they're coming in. The Aussies are certainly favourites, but and like I'm not making a big deal about this McSweeney pickup as well. Like Kishan said, we've got to give him 5 tests, and I agree. Like for me, he's the 11th choice out of in the 11. Like he's not the person that's generally going to make the big difference or expected to make the big difference. But like we always said, like these two teams, it might come down to small margins for the difference between winning and losing. My bigger concern is not so much about the batting as such. I guess it is in a sense, but how are India going to take 20 wickets? That's for me, unless if the wickets are going to be spicy or like Perth is meant to be, or um, you know, and I think I was going to say before, like Melbourne and Sydney are pretty happy hunting grounds for India recently, but the series might be over by then. So for me, that the big question mark is where are India going to sort of get that edge and maybe sneak a win early or put a bit of pressure and get the newspapers writing about the Australian cricket team and their struggles.
I'm going to catch you there on that, Heelzy. Now, you mentioned the wicket-taking capabilities of the Indian cricket team. Australia have got an excellent bowling lineup. Both the Australian and Indian fans have so many expectations for their respective teams. Why don't we get into some specifics? Heelzy, I'll start with you. Who do you think is going to be the leading wicket taker in this series?
So I think that the bowling wickets will be shared amongst the Australians. I think the load will be covered quite well between the four. So I actually think the leading wicket taker will be Bumrah. I think it's going to be a lot on him to take wickets, and I think a good captain, I think he'll probably skip at least the first test, maybe the first two. When there is a sniff to get a wicket, he's got to bring himself on and try and get a breakthrough. So I think Bumrah will take the most wickets in this series.
Kishan?
I'm going to cheat a little here and sit on the fence. I think if Australia win 3-1 or more, it'll be Nathan Lyon. If it's a tight series, if India can jag 2 or more wins, I think it's going to be Pat Cummins.
That's awesome. And then the other side of the coin, of course, is the batters. Kishan, we'll start with you. Run scorers. Where do you? Oh, actually, just before you get into that, I think I'd like to say that I think it'll probably be Hazelwood who'll get the wickets for the leading bowling for the series. And then just going on to the run scorers, Kishan, who do you think the run scorers are going to be at the top of the charts at the end of the series?
This is the $1 million question, isn't it? I'm gonna go with Steve Smith, just because of his history against India, and it feels like this is he's tried opening, he's going back to 4. India are missing Mohammad Shami, Ashwin and Jadeja might not be at the top of their game, so I think it will be Steve Smith who will top the run scorers.
Heelzy?
I'm going to be that romantic fan that just wants to see the greats do great things. And I'm going to, again, sit on the fence a little bit. I'm going to say it's going to be equal runs between VK and Steve Smith.
Oh, I love it, boys. I'm sure the fans would love to see both VK and Steve Smith score lots of runs. I think it'll come a lot lower down the order. I think we'll have a spicy pitch in Perth. I think Adelaide is a day-nighter. Brisbane has somewhat favoured the bowlers, and we saw Shamar Joseph being successful in the last test match here. Melbourne was a spicy deck in that India-Australia A game, and Sydney, well, if it's rain affected, I don't know what'll happen. So personally, I think the runs will come between 4, 5, and 6 between both teams. Australia has Smith, Head, Marsh. Personally, I think Head's got a great record against India as well, so maybe him from the Australian side. And for the Indian cricket team, 4, 5, 6 is probably going to be who's it going to be? It's going to be Virat, Rishabh Pant. Maybe we'll see Dhruv Jurel, or maybe it'll be Sarfaraz Khan. So out of all of them, for me, probably it's going to be Rishabh Pant. So if I was to choose between Head and Pant, I think Head in home conditions. So I'm going to go with Head in this series as the leading run scorer. Which leads to that scoreline, Kishan. You've hedged your bets already. You've kind of said, it might be India might win 2 or Australia maybe 3-1. I need you to give me a firm line here, Kishan. What is the scoreline going to be for this Border Gavaskar Trophy?
I think it'll be 3-1 Australia. with one draw coming due to weather somewhere along, in the Australian summer, probably Sydney, based on recent history. But I think it's going to be, I'm a little bit worried about the Indian batting lineup. I think it's going to be, really over the last 2 years, the performers have been the young guys. Jaiswal has had a fantastic year. Rishabh Pant in his comeback has been fantastic. And it feels like a lot is going to be placed on them. I think Shubman Gill will be great this time around again, having already been to Australia. But I just unlike Heelzy, I'm not too worried about the bowlers. I think Akashdeep, Bumrah, and Ashwin they'll get the 20 wickets. But as of late, when India has lost, it's very, very rarely been due to the bowlers. And against Cummins at the peak of his powers and aided by Lyon, Hazelwood, and Stark, I as much as it pains me to say, I think Australia is going to take this out 3-1, and there are going to be quite a few low scores for India over the next month and a half.
Who's winning in Perth, Kishan?
I think India might get this one. I think they might start with a bang. Just based on fast bouncing, it might be a low scoring affair. Like I think the biggest mistake I think Australian curators could make this summer is making 5 spicy wickets, because as we've seen in India, the more the more minefields you make, the less it favours the home team. So I think they're going to make a fast, bouncy pitch in Perth, and it's going to make it a 50-50 affair. It takes one player to get going with the bat. The bowlers are going to have a field day. So I think India might win in Perth, but that'll be it for them.
Heelzy, do you think India's got a chance in Perth? And what do you think the scoreline's going to be?
I think it's going to be hard for India, especially if there's no Rohit and a little bit of uncertainty of Bumrah as a captain. He's just not that he's not a good player or captain. We just haven't seen him a whole heap being a leader with that title. I think Australia will win in Perth. I think it's just suited to them too much more than it is for India. But we were talking about 5 spicy wickets. I thought Indians are meant to be able to handle spice. So I thought that, I personally think India will win in Sydney and Melbourne, but I think the series might be over by then. So the romantic for me would love a 3-2 either way, but I think Australia might win the first 3. So that's where I'm going with.
So 3-2, you think? Sorry, Heelzy?
Yeah, I want it to be at least at the end of. I want to see some good cricket and it to be close, but I think it might be over early doors.
Good. I would love for India to win that first Test match. I'm going to say Australia will win in a very, very tight match. I think it'll be 2-2 going into Sydney, and it'll be a rain-affected game, which will be a thriller. There'll be less time. Both teams will play aggressive cricket. It'll come down to the wire. I think Australia on home soil, just 3-2 in this series overall. When we come back in January, boys, it'll be day 5 in Sydney. It'll be, what is it, the second week of January or so. Do you think the fans will be happy with what they would have just witnessed in the previous few weeks? Heelzy, I'll start with you.
Fans are going to love this series. I think I said it's going to be close 3-2. I mean, yes, maybe the first 3 Australia might win is what my prediction, but I think we're going to see some really good cricket. And I think it might be a swan song for a couple of the older players who might want to retire from Test cricket and top up their super in the MLC or something like that.
I'm going to be slightly pessimistic here, and I think seeing as the majority of fans are going to be the Indian fans, I don't think they're going to be that happy. If Australia do get on a roll, I think unfortunately it could be the end for a couple of these legends. So I'm going to say largely no.
Thank you, Kishan. That's the exact view that we needed to hear as well. I think the fans will be happy to see good cricket. We have a very polarizing population nowadays, whether it comes to politics or sport or whatever it might be. There's some diehard cricket fans out there that just want to make sure that there's good cricket on view. I'm excited for what's coming up. Thank you, both of you, for joining us for this little preview series. Any final comments, Heelzy?
Look, I just can't wait. We're counting down the days now before that first ball is bowled. Um, Again, I think at the end of the day, cricket's going to be the winner. Whether we see some great players for the last time, you want to remember them for some special moments. I think we'll see a few this series.
Look, just like you boys, I'm very excited. I'm not going to be as diplomatic. I want to see just an India victory. I'd love to see a clean sweep. I could not care about the quality of cricket as long as India is playing good cricket. So, if Australia got out for 50 every single innings, I'd be a very, very happy man.
Love it. Thank you, boys. Thanks, everyone, for listening. As I mentioned before, get on YouTube, get on Apple Podcasts, get on Spotify. Please like, please subscribe. Please leave us a comment. And of course, if you'd like to be a guest on the show or you have any thoughts on how the show is going, please email me at midwicketpodcast@gmail.com. Have a great day. Have a great series. Looking forward to the next episode. Cheers.